Hello everybody, welcome to our LinkedIn Live session. I am Scoble-Williams, a partner with Deloitte based in Japan, and have the privilege of leading Deloitte's future of work efforts globally. We are broadcasting here in Singapore at Industrial Transformation Asia Pacific 2024, otherwise abbreviated as ITAP 2024, and I'm joined by a very special guest today for this exciting conversation. I'm going to allow him to introduce himself before we go any further.
Hi, good morning. My name is Pujari, and my role is to lead manufacturing for a company called ServiceNow, one of the fastest growing SaaS companies in the world for the Asia Pacific and Japan region. Before I hand over the entire stage back to you, I thought I'll just add in a few bits.
Please.
The three things that I have been doing, and I had the privilege of doing for the last 30 odd years, has been in the area of supply chain, manufacturing, and sustainability. And guess what? I think it marries into the event so beautifully, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, we are talking about data, we are talking about automation, and we are talking about people. And all these three areas, which are very dynamic in nature and which have kind of seen a big change in the last 3 decades, kind of marries into the theme of today's event.
Absolutely, Ash. I mean, as you say, we are here focused in such important and engaging conversation around how does the smart manufacturing, how does it play a role in shaping a more sustainable future? And, you know, of course, earlier today I was on the stage looking at the human agenda in all of that, the way that we humanize work to unleash human performance in our AI-powered world. Maybe to kick us off, Ash, as I came from the stage over to here, one of the things that I got stopped at several times coming back was the data point that I shared around 83% of manufacturers saying that attracting and retaining a quality workforce has now become a top challenge for manufacturers, and that they've even been having to turn work away. Absolutely. Only because they can't attract and retain the talent and skills they need. So this data point really seems to be resonating. Ash, keen on hearing your insights, what you're observing and experiencing. Is this a signal of a real burning platform, an inflection point that we're in right now that we really need to tackle if we're going to unlock all of these exciting opportunities for smart manufacturing?
Nick, I actually attended your session, and one of my key takeaways was this data point. So I'm glad that you brought it up and I didn't have to catch you at the corridor. You know, let me take ourselves back a few decades. That's about the time when, you know, I was engaged with a very large semiconductor company. Now, as you know, the semiconductor and electronics industry sort of had leapfrogged the rest of the manufacturing, you know, the sub-industries in terms of automation, in terms of looking at data, etc., right? So this semiconductor company, surprise, surprise, had about 17% of their workforce on the shop floor. And then when I started working with the rest of the sub-verticals like, say, automotive, consumer goods, chemicals manufacturer, that number dropped to less than 5%.
Wow.
Now, if you look at today's context, right, there is a reason why, because there was automation, there was better work conditions, employee health and safety was driven by data, and that's the reason why it was happening at that point in time. So fast forward today, I think with the whole data becoming the new oil, making most enterprises data-driven, looking at automation, hyper-automation, taking away the mundane tasks, all of that is now encouraging more and more people to come into the workforce, right? More and more women, for instance, joining the workforce. I'll give you an example again. In India, there are about 39% of the engineers, the fresh grads, are women. Out of that, about 52% look at joining the IT sector simply because it's not a difficult work environment. You work with latest and greatest, all of that. What has happened now that with AI, Gen AI, the Smart Factory Initiative, all of that, they feel that it's IT on the shop floor, best of both worlds. We learned something in college, now it's IT, why not work on the shop floor? So I think the inflection point that you mentioned clearly shows that there is something that's triggering this move, and we'll see more and more of that happening as we make these shop floors more data-driven.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we're obviously seeing more and more, particularly those frontline workers, talk about how overwhelmed, how stressed they are in needing to accelerate the way that they embrace and use all of these exciting technologies, and the data being the currency that you talk about.
Yeah.
Often needing to do that without the training, the experience that they need to really support them to transition. And I mean, maybe you've got some reflections, Ash, on where we're kind of seeing I think we're seeing a bit of a shift when we look at how are we going to drive that performance.
Yes.
The things that we used to think about and focus on in a world where we had more stability in retaining our workforce, and where we weren't in such volatile times, where our workforce was constantly having to keep up with all the perpetual disruption. It seems that there are some new choices we need to be thinking about to be really able to drive that performance, if I may say.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think you hit it on the head. So I'll give you an example again. A large automotive company talking about how do we relook at our KPIs, right? So at the plant level, OEE was the measure for making sure that the plant was run optimally, the overall equipment efficiency, right? As you all know, that's a key measure. The bonuses were given based on that. What happened was there was a deep level of dissatisfaction in that department. And when I went and talked to the head of plant, the head of the next level, the supervisors, they felt, all this work that we are putting in, where does it go? And why doesn't it reflect that I have put in my little bit to make the company more profitable, or snare in more customers, or improve the customer satisfaction, right? They're obviously looking for a linkage there. Yeah. And maybe I haven't answered your question directly, but the fact still remains that everyone is part of a chain, and they want to be recognized based on that and be fulfilled based on that. Yes. So that is something that I'm seeing more and more as well. And it's becoming much more easier these days because, people are not in silos anymore, right? They are kind of connected to various departments. They feel responsible for an entire flow rather than a subset of the flow. So brings me back to this whole point, like why my journey, right? My journey where I am today vis-a-vis where I was purely with this whole idea of workflow. An intelligent workflow that kind of transcends across those various divisions, right? That's the reason we are in this business in manufacturing where we call it supply chain, right? It's a chain. There are various elements of the chain that are interconnected, right? And these workflows, intelligent workflows, enables all that.
And I love the way that you hit on that word, KPIs and metrics.
Yeah.
Because, one of the things that I was talking about earlier was that new formula for human performance. How do we actually think very differently about what we need to measure, why we need to measure it, what's important, and in particular, the way that we look at the business outcomes and the human outcomes, having a multiplier effect on each other in a mutually reinforcing cycle. And that rise of needing to prioritize the human sustainability, the human outcomes. We haven't necessarily paid the same attention to those human outcomes, whether it is the well-being, whether it's the stronger skills and employability, or the better jobs, the opportunities for advancement, the progress towards equity. I mean, these metrics never before been a part of what is included in the board reports that we need to look at and focus on if we're going to actually drive the bottom line and actually unleash the outcomes, as you say, for our workers, our customers, the organization,
Absolutely.
and society at large. And so I think the call to action around the KPIs,
Yeah.
the metrics, are they aligned to the world of work today? What workers, what employers need, want, and expect from each other. I mean, this is just a pivotal moment.
Absolutely, absolutely. And take one small element called sustainability, right? Which every boardroom discusses. Every individual's KPI is being kind of, that word is inserted into it. And then you have these different definitions of sustainability, or ESG in some ways. Whether it's going to be carbon, whether it's going to be circular economy, whether it's going to be ethical sourcing, whether it's going to be employee welfare, whether it's going to be looking at health and safety, all of that, right? But when you have that common thread, right, you again come back to the same metric around the final outcome. And that outcome goes into an annual report, a press release, in which that individual who was maybe just a sourcing person on the shop floor feels responsible for the outcome of a green line, not just the bottom line and the top line, but the green line, and feels much more fulfilled. And that's just brilliant, because I think we are coming to that inflection point where it's even possible.
Absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned that focus on outcomes. I don't know about you, Ash, but that's one thing that has really stood out to me in all of the deep, thought-provoking conversation here at ITAP the last few days. We keep on hearing the need to really think about why
Yes.
AI. What are we using it for? What are the outcomes? Why does it really matter? And it really seems that the conversation is starting to evolve.
Absolutely.
When I think about ITAP 2023, just 12 months ago,
Right.
here we are now, ITAP 2024, 12 months later, the conversation feels like it's developed. It feels like there is a new or evolving call to action. What would you say? I mean, obviously we've both been here at ITAP for some time. How are you sensing that shift just in the last 12 months?
Well, I think you have touched a raw nerve here, because the first ITAP here, I think it was 2018, I was here. I was up on stage and we were talking about data. And that was the main thing, that how do you pick data from things, make some sense out of it, or ingest it, and create some level of outcome, right? The outcomes were not known, the data governance wasn't there. We were just in those early stages. So as I call it in my own little rudimentary way, I call it a lab project. Everything was a lab project. I think we fast forward today, it's a completely different ballgame. The data from things is a non-issue. Kind of normalizing all of data is a non-issue. The governance is still questionable, so someone needs to put in some kind of a process there. But the interesting bit is now with AI, and especially the Gen AI part of it, wherein, you just make it easy. One of the things I took from your session this morning was the fact that you mentioned that don't look at AI as some solving always complex problems, right? It's not there to solve world hunger, but it's there to make life easier as the first step. So let's look at the crawl to walk that has already happened, which is getting the data. Now we are into walk to run space, right? Wherein AI and Gen AI in 2024 ITAP, we are talking about how do we make the process simpler? How do we summarize certain things? Simple thing, right? You and I, when we go out for a vacation, there's a deluge of emails sitting for us. What do? We'll tell the GenAI engine to summarize all of it and keep it for us so that we come and take a look at what's important. It's very similar. Only the important bits are flushed out And that's how we act on it, so that we free our time for much more important stuff, much more value-added stuff for the organization. And that's 2024.
Yeah, I love that. The way that the acceleration in what we've seen with the rapid advancements in Gen AI has just created an entire new playing field when it comes to data.
Yes.
How we can utilize and get value out of our data. I mean, we see data points like 80% of the data has typically not being utilized.
True.
We're not pulling the value out. And Gen AI totally changing the game in that. And yeah, and again, mate, I love the way that you really heard that, all about using the power of AI and the tech innovation to make work better for humans and humans better at work. Ash, I know that you and I could be here all day, and I know that after this we're going to be back on the floor engaging in the conversations.
Yes.
But I do want to give you the opportunity to give our listeners a closing message, you know, as we think about all of what we are talking about here. How do we unleash that human performance in an AI-powered world? What would your closing message be to our listeners today?
That's you put me on the spot, but I'll kind of bring in my experience around supply chain when I talk about this, right? I think the world has come to a point where there is a blurring of lines that has happened. Okay, blurring of lines in terms of our job functions, blurring of lines in terms of industries itself. So, and I'll come to that in a bit. So what becomes very important is the fact that you, A, have data, and B, you have the ability to act on that data. And all this comes from the discussion around AI, around Gen AI, unlocking that 80% that you talked about, and making sure that it addresses the business issues. So blurring of lines, right? I mean, today, and I'll pick on sustainability as a topic. There was a time when a design department used to be sitting in a glass box, designing new products. And they would have their methods of doing market surveys, etc. But today, that individual now has to look at sourcing, look at sustainability parameters, look at manufacturing capacity, look at contract manufacturers, look at distribution, all of that within a particular paradigm, right? So that work has changed. That blurring of lines has happened already. And you need the power of AI and Gen AI to actually get all that data into a readable, into a way they can act on and make it quick. So design departments that used to do a new product introduction, say they would take 6 to 8 months, are now compressing that to 6 to 8 weeks. Amazing. It's amazing. And I've seen that in one of the largest ketchup manufacturer in the world. So yeah, they are one of the largest consumer goods manufacturers, and they have managed to do that, right? Then there's the whole thing about blurring of lines in terms of industries itself. A retailer is no longer just a retailer. They are a retailer, a logistics player, a contract manufacturer in some sense, right? You will see that some of the e-commerce companies are like that, right? Some of the consumer goods companies are no longer just consumer goods companies. They are consumer goods and a retailer as well, simply because they're looking at direct to consumer. Yes. How do you humanize this part? How do you then make sure that that individual understands the chain? And that is something I would think we are very close to kind of getting it because of the power of AI and Gen AI.
Oh, Ash, I know that the comments around blurring of lines were not by design here, but many of our listeners may be familiar with our Deloitte Global Human Capital Trends Report. And over the last few years, we've been focusing on this new boundaryless world of work.
There you go.
That we have embarked upon in this AI-powered future. And so, wow, the blurring of lines is exactly what we are talking about in all of our research around the boundaryless work. So I feel another LinkedIn live session on the way for our listeners. Ash, it is always such a delight. You always bring energizing, thought-provoking conversation. Our Deloitte and ServiceNow relationship is such an important and special one that
Absolutely.
it's such a privilege. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you, listeners, for joining us today. I know that we are waiting to get back out there on the floor to engage in the exciting conversation. A reminder to everybody, like all LinkedIn Live sessions, this will be available on demand, so please do refer back, share it with others that you feel may find it valuable. We certainly wish you all well on your journeys to humanising work to unleash human performance in an AI-powered world. And on behalf of Ash and I, we wish you a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you very much.